Previously, I did a video titled Why Cracks in the Blade is one of the best chapters in Berserk, and it was one of my favourite videos I've done so far on this channel. Analysing a single chapter of Berserk allowed me to dive deeper into the details of what Miura incorporates into this manga, and provided a slice of why I love this series so much. On my latest reread of the series, Bubbles of Futility stuck out in a similar vein of how I felt whilst reading Cracks in the Blade, and almost feels like a part 2 to the message of that chapter. If Cracks in the Blade was about Guts coming to terms with who he became after the eclipse, and how revenge was clouding his judgment of what truly matters to him, then Bubbles of Futility is Guts coming to terms with what he has lost, and what may remain lost for good, as he continues his newfound quest to restore Casca's sanity. Both chapters offer a theme of acceptance. Cracks in the Blade is acceptance that the awful events at the eclipse happened, and although it's unforgivable, Guts going on a crazed revenge quest for people who were already dead didn't help himself or those who perished that day. Bubbles of Futility is acceptance that no matter how much Guts tries and struggles, Casca will never be the same as she once was. The chapter begins with Guts looking over Casca as they are on board the Seahorse. Insert boat joke here. A detail that hasn't got much discussion as of late is how the Berserker armor is affecting Guts physically. The mental details are hammered home with the Beast of Darkness, but Guts' physical health really starts to degrade when Guts is on the Seahorse, and it's all conveyed visually in this chapter. Guts is watching over Casca on the Seahorse, which is the name of the ship by the way, and just for a brief moment, he loses his sight due to the effects of abusing the Berserker armor. I love the panel by panel realization by Guts of his vision loss, especially the reaction shot of the eye. If you remove this panel, the reader can still tell what Guts is experiencing, but the core of Berserk's storytelling is the emotional realizations that the characters have in their moment of turmoil. Guts' eye is wide and his pupils are dilated, very different to his usual looks where his remaining eye is a big panel focus. Let's compare this one to one of my other favourites Guts reaction shots from Cracks in the Blade. Guts has a crazed look in this panel because he is reminiscing about the horrors of the eclipse, so of course he would. But here, it's one of realisation and sadness, and whilst looking at Casca, the one he loves, he realises that his sight is beginning to go. I love how human the reaction by Guts is, and the little details that Miura incorporates to show this. The slap in the face always gets to me. Like, Guts is so shocked by his temporary vision loss, he's trying to wake himself up in a way, like it's a bad dream. The sound effect being a heartbeat is also crucial. It's these small details which elevate the scene from Guts is losing his sight from the Berserker armor to Guts is losing his sight and he's terrified of a realization. It's nice to see Roderick conversing with Guts here too. He begins to cement himself as a thoughtful and attentive individual, noticing that there is some sensitive history with Guts and Casca when he notices Guts is keeping a watchful eye on her. It's a nice change from the arsehole noble archetype that we saw present throughout the Golden Age arc. Labanda Owen aside, this stinger is really interesting, where Roderick asks what Casca is to Guts, at which point before we see the answer, Fani returns to her physical body, who was practicing going to Illumina's body with Shirake moments before this, afraid of the answer herself. There's not much to say here. It's a nice reminder that actions speak louder than words. We don't need to physically see what Guts is saying, much like Fani, who didn't want to know herself because of her ever-growing feelings for him, because we've seen throughout the series of how much he loves Casca and what she means to him, and the hell he's put himself through to ensure she's safe, and more importantly, in his recent mission, restoring her sanity. But remember those fabled words from Skull Knight, her wish may not be your wish, and that really comes into effect in one of the most emotionally poignant scenes in the series. Casca begins climbing up the ship, and fearful for her safety, Guts reaches out to her, still fearful of Guts due to the events of the early Millennium Falcon arc, and I love the mix of terror and anger shown here in Casca's face. Casca rejects Guts, but as she falls, Guts reaches out to catch her, only for him to use his mechanical arm, which has no means of proper grip. The realization of Guts using his mechanical arm is beautifully panelled and illustrated by Miura, and is a direct parallel to Guts losing his sight momentarily a few pages ago, with similar visual beats like the close-up of his remaining eye once he is realising what is happening. One moment though I'd like to pay attention to in particular is why Casca falls in the first place. There is a small panel here which shows the seahorse hitting a rough patch of sea. The momentum of his action causes Casca to lose balance. It's a small detail, but it adds so much motion to this still medium of manga. It gives a real cause and effect of how Casca fell. Instead of Miura being like, she fell because we need a scene of Guts being sad again, it's nice that the rough environment helps push the story and these emotional beats along. At first, this panel was weirdly hopeful. Guts gripping Casca's hand is imagery that was present throughout the Golden Age, and is followed by moments where the two bonded. But the panel was deceptive, which seems intentional by Miura, and creates a false sense of security for the reader. Guts' mechanical arm is barely visible here, which makes the reader think this will be just like before in the Golden Age. But on closer inspection, we can see the mechanical arm peek through underneath. This isn't like before. What once was an arm Guts used to help Casca time and time again is now a lump of iron, and as we see in the next panel, Guts isn't pulling up Casca this time. This is my favourite panel of the chapter. I adore the visual of the bandages dangling down, and Guts' mechanical arm being almost fully exposed as Casca slips from his reach. It reaffirms the futility of his actions, and how much Guts has physically changed since the last time he reached out to Casca like this. Another key point is Casca's expression as she falls, or lack thereof. A complete blank expression signifies that this is not the same Casca as before, and the memories and dreams she once had have been replaced by a shell who has been scarred by the horrors of the eclipse. Her only emotions left are simple and childlike, be it a fear of Guts or a sisterly bond with Farney. Let's compare this to when she fell near the waterfall in the Golden Age. Her expression was one of tiredness and turmoil. It was painful for her, but she still felt something. You could see the complexity of her emotions as she fell, putting on a forced smile to try and hide her own struggles. This person is now gone for good, and Guts is starting to realise she may never come back. Guts diving headfirst in the sea has so much speed and weight behind it, despite this being a still manga panel. His bandages on the mechanical arm are unravelling at such a quick rate that the arm is now fully exposed. The unravelled bandages are also pointing upward relative to Guts diving downwards. Miura even sticks to the little details here, where some strands are shorter depending where they have caught on the arm, like on his thumb here. Another little detail about this panel is how quickly Guts dove into action, pardon my pun, because Miura displayed a hit spark where Guts jumped off a mast of a ship. It's a blink and you'd miss it sort of detail, but combined with my previous point, it creates a two-point narrative. 1. The force of Guts jumping off a ship is signified by the hit spark, and 2. The speed of diving down is making his bandages unravel at a very quick rate. I love how Miura continues to give Guts' mechanical arm extra weight under the water. In this panel when he's reaching out for Casca, the arm is suspended at almost a 90-degree but crooked angle, like Guts cannot move it at all, and the pressure of it being underwater and how much it would weigh is making it stay in this position, which Guts comments on very shortly, but it's nice to show it visually beforehand for attentive readers. These next couple of pages of a chapter are the most important of a bunch, and where the title name Bubbles of Futility comes into play. Guts manages to grab Casca and pushes her up to the lifeboat before he sinks due to the weight of his mechanical arm. As he's sinking, he begins to reminisce around Casca's relationship with water, that nothing ever good comes whenever she stands next to it. The water-filled backdrop is due to his vision being nothing but seawater, and Guts' life is flashing before his very eyes. Look at Guts' memories of Casca here. Do they look familiar? It's the same presentation of Casca's own memory bubbles, once she's recovered after her dreamscape sequence in recent events in the manga. I think it's purely visual flair here, primarily to match the water theme with the bubbles as Guts is currently sinking. But it's nice to see Miura to carry this over in Casca's dreamscape where it makes sense to return. Due to the entire reason of that sequence was a restoration of Casca's sanity and in turn, her memories. As Guts says himself, the second page of the memory bubbles are bittersweet, painful memories of distant days. The background has changed to a deep black, with a bubble background trailing off to the corner of a page, signifying Guts losing consciousness. Guts protecting Casca and finding out her past, the 100 Manslayer, the bonfire of dreams, when they first proclaimed their love for each other, and Casca saying she has to stay with Griffith. These are all the memory bubbles on display on this page, but notice how the bubbles look less full, and the shapes slowly become more abstract as Guts fades out of consciousness. And this is where the Bubbles of Futility title comes into play. Those memory bubbles of Casca are days long past for Guts, and what he wants to return to. There were memories of varying emotions, but these were what Casca and Guts shared together and allowed them to bond and grow together, through both the bad and the good. But it's futile to even to think about a return to those times, because at the end, it's always the eclipse. That dark day is the key event which changed both him and Casca. No matter how much he may long for those memories of long past, it will always return to the eclipse, where the effects can never be reversed for the two, both physically and mentally. The dark moon of the eclipse positioned in the centre of this visual looks like an eye for the Beast of Darkness, representing the key event fueling Guts' darkness, which is the catalyst for the Berserker armour and his deep mental struggles. The tortured souls of the Hawks forming the rest of the eye only adds more weight to this visual, and is yet another horrible reminder of what happened that day. Not just for him and Casca, but for the rest of the friends they lost too. Guts then wakes up in the ship and is surrounded by his party. The reader has a vague idea of how much time has passed by seeing that Roderick's hair is down, presumably still wet when he dived in to save Guts. Another reason why Roderick is still one of the best relatively new characters in the manga. As Guts worries about Casca's well-being after her dive, Shirokei informs him that she is alive and well, and is currently receiving a hot bath from Fani. She then excuses everyone to reapply Guts' talisman to keep demonic spirits away from his brand, in the final heavy-hitting pages of this chapter. As Shirokei is reapplying the talisman, Guts stares at his mechanical arm, and remembers Casca slipping from his reach. This panel of Guts staring at the stub where his arm once was, is one which is sombre and sad. I love how Miura colours the background entirely in black, with a white background being only applied around Guts' body. The focus in this moment isn't anything in the background, not the ship, not Shirokei, no external factors at all. It's simply a sad individual realising for the first time in a long while what they have truly lost, and that it will never come back. Guts comments to Shirokei that he'd forgotten that he just used that arm as a lump of iron, so he could beat up his enemies. Remember, it doesn't even have a proper grip. It's magnetised to the Dragon Slayer, hence why he couldn't grab Casca with that hand, but that's beside the point right now. He didn't intend for that arm to be a replacement in the traditional sense, just another battle weapon in his arsenal for his demon killing quest, and the moment where he needed the arm the most, to reach out to his loved one as he did in the Golden Age, well, as he puts himself, she slipped right through. This final panel is not only iconic, but is a testament to how incredible this chapter is. As Guts grips the stub where his arm once was, he ends with this: I guess, even if you force back what was lost, it still won't be the way it was. It's not just the arm here, but Guts' physical state as a whole reflects this message. Despite still being a chiseled, beautiful god, his scarred body, patch of white hair from the effects of a Berserker armour, and his missing eyes signify that he's undergone massive physical hardship since the eclipse, and that he can never return before those times. However, the message of Guts' closing words mainly apply to Casca herself, that even if she does restore her sanity, it's not just a switch where she will be like how she was pre-eclipse. The events of that horrific day will affect Casca's mental and physical state like how it did Guts, and based on the recent events of the manga, we know Guts' haunting words to be true. This chapter also leaves a weirdly hopeful message deep in the darkness. Guts is right, you can't force back what was lost, but at the same time, you shouldn't, but instead learn to move forward. As Godo helped Guts realise how to move forward, Casca has not only Guts, but the rest of the party to help her move forward in a healthier way than how Guts started out. This chapter provided excellent emotional beats and insights on par with Kraxen the Blade, acting as another deep dive into Guts' psyche and retrospect on his journey so far. Bubbles of Futility acted as a sad reality of acceptance for Guts, that the past can't be forced back, and that he has to be prepared for what Casca may be like when she recovers. But for now, especially after the latest chapter in the manga, who knows what the future may hold. Thanks for watching.